Rogers is our guest throughout the course of the hour today. We've got lots and lots of input already on the show. Jim, it's good to see you.
I am delighted to be here, Bernie. It's been a while.
What is it with these bailouts? It's like everybody's learning from America. Hey, we can bail them out. Let's do our own TARP program. Let's bail out our own car industry.
It is totally outrageous. It's absurd economics, and it's absurd morality. It does not do any good to prop up sinking ships. It's absurd. Your mother taught you never to throw money down a rat hole. Your father told you not to throw good money after bad. That's what they're doing. And it's your money is the problem and my money that they're throwing this time.
Now they taught me don't even borrow money to buy a car because it's a disposable asset. Maybe a home if you really need it, but do it within prudent means or something like that. So what do you think? You think that all this bailout's coming to naught? You think the Geithner and Obama are completely barking up the
Totally wrong. Totally wrong. They're doing what Japan tried in the 1990s. You remember the zombie banks? Remember the zombie companies that never failed? Japan is still talking about the last decade, the lost decade. Japan is still 90% below where it was, or 80% below where it was in 1990, the stock market. I mean, this is not going to work. It didn't work in Japan. It's never worked anywhere. It's not going to work in America this time or in Japan this time.
So where do you think this is all headed then? You know, we've had, it's kind of funny because some of your peers who've been sitting in that exact same seat in recent days, you know Noriel very well, Dr. Doom, the newly fashioned Dr. Doom, one of the original Dr. Dooms. Mark Faber was here yesterday talking us through the markets, and there seems to be this magic number. Everybody's aiming for 500 on the S&P as if that is going to be the bottom, very, very bottom of the crater.
Well, first of all, I'm not smart enough to have a clue how far.
You keep saying that, but people keep
It's
listening.
true. I'm not.
Why do they keep listening to a guy who's not very smart?
Well, I mean, listen, Dr. Green has been long the S&P for the last 2 years, 100% long the S&P, and he says it's going to 500. I don't understand that. He's long, and he says it's going down. Anyway, back to me instead of other people. I know we're going to have a long recession. I know we are going to have the worst time since the 30s. They may turn it into the 1930s again. There's a very good chance of that. And we could have a very long period of time. We're going to have civil unrest in the U.S. We're going to have civil unrest in other countries. We're already having civil unrest in many places. Now, this is going to be a mess, Bernie. Be prepared. Hope I'm wrong, but be prepared.
This is why they're trying to stimulate more than just financials. And we're going to talk about AIG a little bit later in the program, because a lot of people are so hot under the collar about what's going on with their hard-earned money and the way it's being used. But if you paper over, if you sort of bandage the wounds, and that is the rank and file, the common people, the hurting Joe out there in any town in America, is that going to have any kind of the intended effect? They're trying to keep them from rioting, obviously.
Well, yeah, but make work can only go so far. Ultimately, you have to have somebody making products and making real progress. You have to have somebody building an economy and building equity. Making work is not going to do any good. The Chinese, Singapore, places like that at least seem to be spending their money in the right ways. But in America, most of it is make work, and that's not going to. They hope that they make work for a few months. Ultimately, the whole system will come back. I'm telling you, it's not going to work. You're
talking in very, very dire tones about what is coming, the kind of things that we're going to be running against in future months. It almost sounds like you are a short master right now, completely short everything, just about every asset class, because everything is collapsing faster than the house of cards. Well, am I reading you right or not?
No, quite the contrary. I have very few shorts at the moment. I covered most of my U.S. shorts in October, November. I wish I hadn't. I covered most of them. I'm still short some things right now. But Bernie, I'm wildly optimistic on some things. I mean, agriculture is going to be a spectacular business for the next decade or two. Many people are going to do extremely well during this period.
And those are the people who adopt what kind of a risk profile, what kind of an overall theme to their mentality?
They go into businesses that have been bad for a long time, where there's a basic need, such as food, as a place to start. Agriculture has been a horrible business for 30 years.
You've stuck with that theme. You said that to me last week on the morning show. You really believe?
I haven't changed in a week.
This is going to be the age of agraria.
Yes, this is going to be. You're exactly right. You should turn in your degree and get yourself a farming degree.
I don't know. I got 3 of them. It cost me. I'm still. You happy with your president?
No, not in the least. I think he's making terrible, terrible, terrible mistakes, and he's going to prolong this. He may well turn this into the Great Depression #3.
What would you have done? What do you
I
think
would
you
have let
should
them
have
all go bankrupt.
Ooh.
The idea that they're spending over $1 billion
done? That.
on bonuses at AIG is total insanity. They should have let them go bankrupt. They wouldn't have to pay anybody anything if they'd let them go bankrupt. These are bankrupt companies, Bernie. You don't throw money into a bankrupt company. You give the money to competent people who can start over from a sound and solid base. You don't try to prop up dead companies or dead assets.
You know, they didn't think they were going to be dealing with AIG this long, or to this tune of, 100 whatever $billion. I don't think
That's because they didn't do their homework. They didn't do their homework. Anybody who looked at it,
back for more.
but Bernie, anybody who got into Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or Citibank knew that these things had gigantic liabilities. And now they're the liabilities of the American taxpayer, and not just the taxpayer, the world. I'm afraid we're all going to suffer.
What there are different models around the world. Everybody's talking about nationalization of all these industries. That's a bad thing, though, in your view.
Bernie, the way it's supposed to work is when people go bad, you let the incompetent people fail. The competent people come in, take over the assets, reorganize the assets, and start over from a sounder base. What they're doing now, Bernie, they're taking the assets away from the competent people, giving them to the incompetent people, and saying, okay, now you compete with the competent people with their assets. This is horrible economics. It has never worked, and it's terrible morality. I mean, politicians don't care about morality, of course.
Okay, I'm going to put the menu in front of you. Got the usual commodity questions: forex, autos, hedge funds, inflation versus deflation, real estate, U.S. markets, banks. What do you want to start with? What do you feel most passionate about? Can I start off with financials since you're talking about AIG? Okay, here's a question from Bernard. Bernard Ton writes in, hi, Jim. When can we buy financials again, if ever? The operative word, if ever.
Mr. Ton, normally when something like this happens, the last thing to come out of all of it is the thing that led the problem going in. So normally 5, 6, 7 years from now, 8 years from now, you might start a new rise. That's not to say you can't have huge trading rallies and make a lot of money if you're nimble and quick. But historically, you don't buy these things until they clean themselves out, and it usually takes a long time.
Long time meaning what? What is a long
8
time?
8 years, 7 years.
How many?
8 years, 7 years. It depends. 10 years.
Sounds like Japan.
Well, it's like Japan. It's exactly like Japan.
That's what we're just talking about.
They're doing exactly the same mistakes that they did in Japan. But I just, in my experience in the markets, it usually, when you have a big bubble in an industry, it usually takes several years, 6, 8, 10 years, for everything to clean out, and then you start over. You revisit years later, and you may find great opportunities.
A second ago, you said you covered your shorts. If you're so bearish on the market, why were you covering short positions, and how were
Citibank went down 90%. Fannie Mae went bankrupt. I mean, the things I'm still. By the way, I'm still short the investment banks. I'm still short J.P. Morgan. I'm still short IBM. I'm still short, but for the most part, I covered my short just because they collapsed. You're supposed to buy low.
Here's a question from Michael in New York. I just pulled this. It just came literally across the tape here. Jim, is it possible the U.S. government is combining with the Federal Reserve to let the dollar fail in order to present a new currency, which everybody is talking about, the Amero?
Well, Michael, I've heard this story about the Amero quite a lot. I don't think the Amero, I think that's one of those, that's an internet myth, if you ask me. I cannot imagine the American Congress would do something. I do think that the American government is trying to debase the currency. There's no question about that. Mr. Bernanke has said many times that he'll drop dollar bills out of helicopters if he has to. So, yes, I think they're trying to debase the currency. Do they expect to replace it with an Amero or something? I doubt it. That could happen, but I doubt it.
Your pick, because any conceivable commodity